There is a lot going on. We've just been hearing from the NATO chief, Jens Stoltenberg. We will hear from other world leaders throughout the day. Ukraine, just to recap some of the developments, claims that Russian troops are near the capital, Kyiv. 3 Russian helicopters have been downed, according to Ukraine. The Kremlin says that the Ukraine operation will last as long as necessary, and the Kremlin insists that the aim is the demilitarization, as it terms it, of Ukraine. And after months of speculation and calculations from other world powers, assessments and back-to-back diplomatic talks, Russia has begun that military action in Ukraine. The president of Russia delivered a speech announcing the start of what he called a special military operation to demilitarize and, in his words, denazify Ukraine.
Circumstances require firm and immediate action from us. Donbass's People's Republic asked for help from Russia. In this regard, according to the Article 51, Part 7 of the United Nations Charter, with the consent of the Russian Federation Council and in accordance with the ratified agreement on 22nd February of this year on friendship and mutual aid with Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, I decided to conduct a special military operation. Its goal is the protection of people who during 8 years suffered from abuse and genocide from the Kiev regime.
Well, what appears to be a broad military offensive began in the early hours of the European morning, soon after President Putin's televised speech. Started the biggest attack by one state against another in Europe since World War II. Russian missiles were raining down on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine reported columns of troops pouring across its borders into the eastern Chernihiv, Kharkiv and Lugansk regions. Russian troops entered the cities of Odessa and Mariupol in the south by the sea. A lot of these details are hard to confirm because of conflicting accounts from the Ukrainian and Russian sides, but the initial wave of strikes appeared to involve cruise missiles, artillery and airstrikes as well, striking military infrastructure and border positions, including air bases. Flashing lights were seen above the skies of Ukraine's border regions. After just a few hours of the attack, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed to have neutralized Ukraine's air bases and air defenses. There were explosions heard before dawn in places, gunfire rattling out near the main airport, and sirens blaring across multiple cities. There are eyewitness videos circulating which show smoke billowing from the Ukrainian military airport in Chuguev. Reports suggest Ukrainian border guards were firing back as Russian troops unleashed artillery barrages as part of an attack from Belarus. Air raid sirens rang out in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, in the wee hours of the day. Sirens were heard playing out across the morning traffic, and in just hours after Russian troops launched their anticipated attack, a large number of people were out on the streets. There were long lines of traffic on a road leading out of the capital city as people tried to move away from Kyiv. The Russian military said they didn't attack any populated areas in Ukraine, but there is one video showing a missile hitting an airport in Ivano-Frankivsk city. A missile can be seen falling on the establishment and exploding with a bang. As I say, a lot of this is hard to verify one way or the other.
Dear Ukrainians, this morning Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation in the Donbass. Russia carried out strikes on our military infrastructure, on our border guards. Explosions were heard in many cities of Ukraine. We introduced martial law throughout the state. A minute ago, I had a conversation with US President Joe Biden. The US is starting to gather international support. Today we need you. Each of you needs to be calm. If possible, stay at home, please. We are working, the army is working. The entire security and defense sector of Ukraine is working.
There are eyewitness reports coming in from Ukraine, and one of them has reached out to WION.
Kyiv is full of smoke. This is a city center. Every 5 minutes, bomb is dropping by Russian army.
Well, let's go to my colleague Ross Cullen now, who's live for us in Paris. And Ross, what is France saying so far?
Well, Ollie, if I'm just with my eyes off screen because I'm just monitoring to see when Emmanuel Macron will speak. He is expected to address the nation very shortly. He has concluded a meeting of the French Defence Council this morning with the Prime Minister, the Interior Minister, other senior secretaries such as the Defence Secretary and Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French Foreign Minister. He has also released a statement in the last few minutes, Jean-Yves Le Drian, saying that I've got the readout here from the French Foreign Ministry. France condemns in the strongest terms the military invasion launched by Russia. This choice of war constitutes a brutal violation of international law. It will immediately lead to severe consequences. France will further strengthen its support for Ukraine in all its forms. That's Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French Foreign Minister, speaking a short time ago. Emmanuel Macron, we haven't heard from him since the conclusion of that Defence Council. He did tweet earlier this morning saying that France stands side by side with Ukraine, stands shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with our friends from Ukraine, and he also said that we strongly condemn Russia's decision, and Russia must also immediately act to stop this war. What does Emmanuel Macron want? Well, he is calling for a NATO summit to be held as soon as possible. We've already heard from the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, Jens Stoltenberg, in the last few minutes. Emmanuel Macron calling for a NATO summit, which the Elysée confirms he will be attending that. There's also meant to be an emergency European Union summit taking place in Brussels later today, Thursday. Possibly further discussions with Western partners such as President Biden, Prime Minister Johnson and also Chancellor Scholz in Germany. Last night there was a call. Emmanuel Macron reached out to President Zelensky of Ukraine. He really has been, President Macron, one of the top diplomats in trying to broker a peace deal, a go-between, regularly speaking to Vladimir Putin over the past week and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. It seems to no avail because now we have this Russian incursion into Ukraine in several different areas of the country, and France has been reacting strongly with those words from Jean-Yves Le Drian, Emmanuel Macron earlier today, and we expect shortly Emmanuel Macron in a full address to the nation.
And Ross, might we expect to hear Emmanuel Macron talking about further sanctions and how they might be levelled against Russia? And if so, what form might they take from the European Union, which only unveiled and signed off, of course, on its first round of sanctions yesterday?
Its first round of sanctions signed off yesterday, announced here in Paris by the French Foreign Minister and the European Union's top foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, announcing sanctions against Russian parliamentarians, against some Russian banks, other individuals and entities linked to trading with those two regions of Ukraine, which Vladimir Putin now considers to be independent states, Luhansk and Donetsk. We can try to work out what level these sanctions might be scaled up to. We've already had comments this morning from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and, as I say, Josep Borrell. He was also speaking again, saying that the European Union is minded to bring in against Russia the harshest sanctions it has ever impose on a country. So we could really see a scaling up now, a widening of the number of people targeted by these sanctions, likely to include members of the Russian cabinet, and also a freeze on Russian financial payments, potentially using the SWIFT international payments system. There will be a scaling up of humanitarian aid and a scaling up potentially of military aid to Ukraine, because we already are seeing these pictures. I know they are hard to verify, but Russian tanks rolling in, potentially not just from the north, from southern Russia and southern Belarus, but also coming in from Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, that peninsula in southern Ukraine. So we are likely to see the European Union imposing these sanctions, so France contributing towards that. They want to present this unified face of all 27 nations announcing their combined agreed sanctions. That was something which was hard to find accord across the bloc, because there are countries such as Hungary, Italy and Austria which do have closer economic ties to Russia. We've heard the Hungarian Prime Minister in the past saying that sanctions and threats are not the way to try to resolve this crisis. He says you have to be close to Russia, as well as being, if you are like Hungary, a member of the EU and NATO. So we are unlikely to see specific French sanctions. We are very likely to see France driving full throttle in the EU to try to get an agreed package of sanctions agreed as soon as possible and to be imposed as soon as possible. So he is likely to underscore comments he and his foreign minister made. Emmanuel Macron hasn't started speaking yet, in strongly condemning what they see as a violation of international law, a violation of a state's territorial integrity. And remember that Ukraine borders 4 European Union member states in Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, along with Romania. So this is a crisis on the EU's borders. So we are likely to see a lot of mention from Emmanuel Macron of how the EU, of how Europe comes together to deal with this crisis on its southern and southeastern borders.